There is one big reason why you're struggling to reach your goals, reach your vision, why your community or your organization is really struggling to drive change forward. My name is Danielle. I'm a community mentor and I help communities drive forward people first change. And this means I understand the human side of change. So if you're someone, you have a goal, you have a vision, you have a dream, there's some kind of change you're ready to make in your life, but you feel like you keep running into invisible blocks, then this video is for you. As we talk about change, let's talk about the big mistake that most organizations and communities and people make when they're driving forward a change. We see a change. Maybe we get excited about it. Maybe we see a problem that we want to fix. We want solutions and we want them now. And this urgency to change is actually a huge mistake that creates far more harm and quitting and barriers than we actually realize half the time. Now, let's talk a little bit about urgency and why people use it to drive forward change management. Why people use emergencies and horrible facts and statistics to hook you in to certain kinds of change. Why do we do it? Well, on one hand, it is very, very powerful because those statistics, those facts, those one-liners, those hooks activate our sympathetic nervous system response. And that response is when our adrenaline kicks in. It is our fight or flight or freeze response. It is what is wired within us to keep us safe. And so when we perceive a danger, like a horrible statistic about a population we care about, we are inspired to act. And because this is tapping into our biological wiring, it is very powerful in the short term. But change does not happen in the short term. And whether you're focusing on individual goals right now, or whether you have a bigger, broader vision for your community or organization, change requires long-term, consistent action to really root into ourselves or the systems that we live in. When we're relying on urgency to bring that long-term, consistent action into being, when we're relying on that stress response, we are setting ourselves up for failure. Because if we're constantly relying on deadlines or horrible statistics or this or that sense of fear to drive forward change, we're going to constantly be activated by that fear, that danger, and we're going to burn out. And we do talk about chronic stress a lot, about how false deadlines at work is contributing to people, rates of depression, rates of anxiety, rates of overwhelm, rates of burnout. It's all connected. But when we're talking about broader social issues, it's the same. And one of the reasons why it's so hard and difficult to drive that long-term consistent action on a collective, communal, organizational level is some people tap out of the urgency response quicker. Some people see that and their gut instinct is to deny the change is needed at all. That's very, very common, something I saw every single day when I was working in climate adaptation. And there's also the people who they care a lot, but they can't sustain that. Not from a place of danger or fear. And so, if you're driving change from a place of urgency, whether that's just yourself, trying to build a business and you're setting all these deadlines for yourself, you're setting all these goals for yourself of, if I don't do this by then I failed. Well, if you don't have a tolerance for failure and you reach that point, or you don't have the same followers or views or whatever that you expected by that point, you haven't lost the weight you wanted to lose by that point, you're a lot more likely to quit. You're a lot more likely to give up. You're a lot more likely to go back to the old patterns that, okay, maybe they weren't the healthiest. Maybe they weren't helping you build the life you wanted to build, but they were predictable. You knew it was going to happen. You knew you could succeed in those patterns. They are familiar, and because they're familiar, they have a sense of safety, even if they aren't in your best interest. This is often why we see things regress after we make some sort of progress. Because that familiarity is very, very, very potent. It's tempting. It's comforting. Even if it's not good for us, it's comforting. And I did throw in a whole bunch of examples of different changes that we might be trying to make. It could be very simple. Maybe you are trying to lose weight, and there could be any reason you're trying to do that. I hope if that is the case for you, you are, nourishing yourself still and taking care of yourself, and it is from a mindful place. You could just want to be stronger. You might be working out because you want to be able to play with your niece and nephew and throw them over your shoulder. You could want to build a business like I've built. And I can tell you, if you're only building from a place of urgency, it's not going to work, because I had to really unlearn my patterns for urgency so I can feel comfortable building a business for the long term, so I can change in the way I need to change for my business to succeed. And understanding that there is no end goal. That's the other thing about urgency, is it gives us this idea of, well, if we just get past this milestone or this deadline, we're going to be okay. But then you rest for a day and you need a new one in order to keep that motivation going. Other changes we could be trying to make is on a community level. Maybe we want to bring a program into being, or we're funding for a new building or something like that. Changes in an organization. It could be technological. It could be values-based. The reality is change in whatever capacity is inevitable. It's going to happen. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we show up for that change in a way that A, isn't relying on urgency and pushing us into chronic stress, because we deserve better than that, and B, allows us to maintain long-term consistent commitment towards that goal. How do we meet change with our eyes wide open, mindfully, consciously, with curiosity, but also in a way that's going to actually support the length of time that a lot of changes need to settle in to a new normal? These are really important questions in the people first change management space, in any change management space. And the reality is it's going to be very, very difficult to move any change forward if we don't know how to, one, motivate ourselves outside of the fear cycle, and two, actually how to sit with discomfort and fear and uncertainty through that change cycle. Because the other thing, I mentioned that I started a business. This is my business. There was a lot of uncertainty and discomfort in the process of building this business, and I know I'm not through it all. I could not continue on this path if I was not building my capacity for distress tolerance, if I was not building my capacity to sit with uncertainty. I also would not be here still if I couldn't tolerate the fact that I need to change. I want to change my circumstances, but that means internally there's a lot of change that needs to happen too. That was very, very close to my heart, and I'm very grateful for it. And that's a big part of why I'm doing the work I do, because I know how empowering it is to be able to drive change in all of these different ways. So let's talk about what this actually looks like in your life, in your community, in your organization, in whatever system you live in. Let's talk about what it takes to drive change in a good way. Or let's rephrase it a little. Let's talk about what it takes to be in right relationship with change. Because when we talk about change through the lens of relationships, and we see resistance, and we see denial, and we see fear, and we see either over control, trying to control the uncertainty, or just not willing to engage with it at all and letting the change happen to us, if that change was a person, that's not any way to build a relationship, right? So how do we exist in right relationship with change? The very, very first step that I can offer you is taking the time to understand your nervous system. And this includes understanding the science behind it, but also very much how you respond to certain triggers, threats, fears, limiting beliefs. Journal on it. Ask yourself these questions. Ask yourself why you feel like that certain kind of change feels unsafe. What are you scared of? Get to know your fears. And as you do that, incorporate the tools you need to sit with them instead of hide from them. This can look like breath work. I'm a huge fan of breath work because when we breathe, and this is why I have guided meditations, a whole playlist of them that you can go check out if you want. When we breathe, we activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our calm down cycle. By breathing deeply, we signal to our body that we're safe. And so we can still hold in our mind, entertain these ideas of what this change might look like, while telling our body it is safe to do so. And that helps prepare us to actually take those changes in stride when they show up. Other strategies you can do are somatic exercises, things like rocking, shaking, stomping, moving energy through your body is very, very powerful. I also mentioned journaling. For me, I really value journaling because I am a very mental person, cognitive person. I like to write things out. It helps me process a lot that otherwise kind of gets stuck. My challenge was always making sure that went all the way through and grounding into my body through that awareness, not just staying aware, but not changing, So that's one thing. Build your capacity to sit with discomfort, to sit with distress, and to find safety in yourself, even when the world around you is uncertain. The next very, very powerful strategy tool that I can offer you is taking the time to understand your values. And this isn't a fluffy thing. Our values are the things that bring us fulfillment, bring us satisfaction, bring us joy. And our values are the things we prioritize. They are the things that cost us something in a way. Every single decision we make is going to be made based on values. But whether we're happy or not with that decision is going to be dependent on whether or not we chose based on our core values or based on what someone else told us to care about. And over time, psychologists have found if you're not living in alignment with your values, if you're not making choices based on what you care about, you're more likely to be depressed, to have anxiety, to be apathetic or numb, or just disenchanted with life in general. Now, the reason why values are so important for change management is when we're making choices, and often those choices can be hard, they can be difficult, they can cost us something. When we're making choices based on our values, we are internally motivated to choose those hard things. And intrinsic motivation that comes from somewhere inside us as opposed to some deadline or reward or validation from outside of us. When it comes from inside us, it helps us build self-efficacy, it helps us build presence, it helps us feel empowered and like we are actually shaping our lives because we are. When we have a vision, when we have a goal, finding what internal motivation exists for that goal or vision is going to really help us when we are in the middle of the fog, when we're going through challenges. Or I was reading a book yesterday called Ally is a Verb by Rose LeMay. Great book, wonderful book. And in it, she shared a little story about how she used to go hiking, and not only would she have to look forward to see where she was going, of course, but she also had to look behind her so on the way back she could tell where she had been. And this was really important in the context of getting lost. And she compared this to how we need to build this same kind of awareness through change. And in her book, it was about reconciliation. We need to build this awareness to see how far we've come, where we came from, and we need to have this hope going forward. But when we're stuck in the valley and we can't see the hope, we need to know how far we've come. Our values help us do that work. And it is so worth the work to do it. If you are interested in exploring your values more deeply, I have the Value Identification and Exploration Workbook. I will leave it in the show notes below. It is a wonderful resource, probably one of my favorites that I've created yet. And it really guides you through the power of story and narrative through what your values are, through when you've made choices that maybe weren't necessarily values aligned, why you made those choices, and how you want to evolve. It's a fantastic resource. Highly recommend it. Check it out if you're called. Now, we have distress tolerance. We have values. These are wonderful ways to support our changes, our goals, our visions, what we want to bring into the world. But all the same, reading about it, practicing, they're just practice. We need to have spaces too, where we can meet with other people, where we can compare notes, where we can process some of the hefty stuff that shows up when we are wading through challenges or trying to reach certain goals, when we're trying to build something or create something that we've never done before. It's hard and we need support. We need community. So when we're in an organization or a community, we can build those networks there. When we're doing this on our own, or when we're the only ones in our community who are bringing this awareness to the present moment, to the front, so to speak, we need support, perhaps from outside that community. And that is why I would love, love, love to invite you, if you're still watching this video, to my June cohort of A Practice in Being. It is an online virtual experience that's going to last 4 weeks. We're going to meet once a week to talk about the changes that we want to create, what's going on inside of us to help make those changes real, and different lessons and perspectives we can bring into those situations so we can actually ground this change in the reality we are creating. There's going to be 4 weeks, and each of those weeks is going to kind of target a different lesson. The first week would be discomfort, distress. How do we actually sit with that? How do we deal with that? Where is it coming from? Then we're going to talk about how to cultivate this openness and curiosity for the changes we're experiencing. From there, we're going to talk a little more about values and how to explore our values, what that looks like, what it means to live by our values or incorporate change based on our values. And finally, how do we take brave action to integrate those changes in meaningful ways, in ways that are real, in ways that are consistent, and in ways that help that vision be birthed in the long term. It's a wonderful project, and I would love for you to join me. Registration closes for that on May 31st, so go to the show notes now, click on A Practice in Being, and sign up so you do not miss this wonderful opportunity. It likely will not be offered for free again. So if you're interested, June is the month. There will be recordings available, so check it out. Join me on that. Again, my name is Danielle. There are a lot of reasons that people resist change, and as someone who focuses on people first change management, I know that by creating spaces for us to be honest about how hard it can be is going to transform our capacity that we have to not only sit with change, acknowledge change, understand change, but take an active role in how that change lands in our life. My mission is to help people deepen their connections to self, to others, and to the environment, because I truly believe that it is through these connections that we're going to change the world. And I think there's some pretty big changes that need to happen. So if you would love to see more content like this, I would love to hear your thoughts. Subscribe if you want to see more of my videos. And if you want to continue your journey, you can even head over to vibrantsystems.ca to see what other resources I have available for you. Let's make your story a vibrant one.